He wiped the sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag when the company's vice president threw it in his face. Janitors shouldn't scare customers. No one had any idea that at that very moment, his shabby phone was quietly recording all their financial mistakes, the very same ones that would soon crash the stock price by 37%. And when Wolfe Stone Capital's elevators delivered him not to the back room but to the penthouse tomorrow morning, those who laughed would be shaking. But no one expected exactly how he would hold them accountable for every humiliation. Every morning, at 5:30 sharp, when the first rays of sunlight were just beginning to break through the thick smog of the metropolis, heavy, worn boots with peeling soles clattered on the mirror-polished marble of Wolfe Stone Capital's lobby. Their owner, a tall, dark-skinned man with tired eyes and hands covered with old scars, stepped inside, trying to tread as quietly as possible, as if afraid to disturb the spotless sterility of the place. Marcus Reynolds. A name no one here knew or wanted to know. To them he was just a part of the interior, a faceless shadow that disappeared by 8 o'clock in the morning, when the office was filled with expensive suits and ringing voices. "Coffee, Jackson!" came a sharp, habitually dismissive shout, as Marcus bent down to wipe another glass partition. Brandon Taylor, one of the financial analysts, didn't even look at him, his fingers tapping rapidly at the keyboard, his eyes fixed on the monitor, where the numbers that could make someone rich and someone bankrupt in a second were bouncing around. "I'm not Jackson," Marcus answered quietly, but his voice was lost in the echo of the spacious lobby, in the creak of the leather chairs, in the chuckles of the traders discussing last night's parties. No one heard. No one listened. And then the elevator broke. Marcus had to walk up the stairs, step by step, water bucket heavy in one hand, rag in the other. His back was quickly covered in dark sweat stains, he's breathing deeper, but he didn't stop. On the 5th floor, he was overtaken by Cynthia Morris, a vice president with an immaculate rack and a white coat that cost more than he'd made in 3 months. She slowed her step, her cold gaze sliding over his bent back, his labor-wet shirt, his hands, which too clearly gave him away as a man accustomed to hard work. "Janitors are supposed to use the freight elevator," she said in a flat, icy tone. "You're scaring the customers." Marcus didn't answer. He nodded, clutching the rag so tightly that the joints of his fingers turned white. There was no submission in his silence, just a muffled, slow simmer. He knew it wouldn't change anything if he said anything in response. These men didn't see him as a man. They saw a function. A stain on the glass that needed to be erased. But somewhere deep down, behind the layer of fatigue and familiar indifference, something new was already stirring. Something dangerous. The Wolfe Stone Capital office after midnight was a completely different space, dead and lifeless, where only the ghosts of numbers continued their endless dance on the screens of frozen monitors. In this sepulchral silence, broken only by the crackling of the server's cooling system and the occasional footsteps of the night guard, Marcus Reynolds was alone with what he secretly called his curse. His long fingers, covered with a network of fine scars from chemical burns and years of physical labor, fluttered with surprising grace over the keyboard of an abandoned workstation in the corner of the open space. This computer had long been considered a write-off, it hadn't been updated, cleaned, or used. A completely nameless machine for a completely nameless person. A complex financial model was unfolding on the screen, tables, charts, automated trading algorithms. Marcus leaned closer, his dark eyes, usually downcast to the floor, now greedily absorbed every figure, every dependency. He saw what all those expensive analysts with their degrees from prestigious universities had missed. He saw a bug in the code, a tiny bug in the algorithm that was sucking $2 million out of the company every month, drop by drop, going nowhere. Footsteps in the hallway made him freeze for a moment, but he didn't look away from the screen. It was Carlos Mendoza, the only person in the entire skyscraper who not only knew his name, but said it without condescension. The guard was holding a sandwich, a piece of stale bread and cheese wrapped neatly in oiled paper. "Back to your hobby again?" Carlos's voice sounded both mocking and strangely warm. He set the food on the edge of the table, which was littered with printouts and notes in Marcus's crooked but surprisingly neat handwriting. Marcus slowly pulled himself away from the monitor. His face, usually expressing only resignation, was now strained with inner focus. "They're losing 2 million every month." His voice, normally quiet and timid, now sounded firm. A dark finger poked at a line of code. "Right here. A rounding error. Every time the algorithm encounters a certain value, it." Carlos interrupted him with a loud sigh. "Who cares what the janitor thinks?" Silence hung between them in a thick, almost palpable cloud. Marcus slowly unwrapped the sandwich, his fingers trembling slightly, not from hunger, but from something else. Because he saw the numbers, saw the solution, but knew his voice would never be heard in this world of polished marble and golden parquetry. "Maybe you should go home, Marcus," Carlos said quietly, and for the first time his voice sounded not just kind, but something like concern. This isn't your war." Marcus didn't answer anything. His eyes were once again fixed on the screen, where the numbers continued their mute cry. Where the truth he saw so clearly remained invisible to everyone else. And somewhere deep inside, in a place where even Carlos couldn't look, a decision was already maturing. Wolfe Stone Capital's office experienced a morning that will go down in the corporate warfare textbooks. At 8:17 a.m., the company's stock suddenly plunged 37%. By 8:23, traders began selling securities en masse. By 8:31, the entire 30th floor had become a madhouse. Analysts were running around with printouts, vice presidents were yelling into their phones, and Cynthia Morris was rereading the same text message from her broker for the 5th time. It was at that moment that the door to the conference room where the entire board of directors was gathered softly swung open. The trio that entered looked like a still from a bad corporate thriller. On the left was Carlos Mendoza, the night security guard whose face had lost all color. His fingers were frantically clutching a cap with the company logo on it. On the right, an unidentified man wearing glasses and carrying a thick folder of documents with Reynolds Holdings LLC emblazoned on the cover. And in the center, Marcus Reynolds. But it wasn't the same Marcus anymore. His posture, his gaze, the very aura around him, everything screamed power. A briny suit worth an analyst's annual salary sat perfectly on his broad shoulders. Italian shoes tapped softly on the parquet. Even his skin seemed to glow a different shade, not tarnished from the night shifts, but as noble and dark as polished mahogany. "Gentlemen," his voice, usually barely audible, now filled the hall without the slightest effort. "It seems we have a change of agenda." A presentation flashed on the screen behind him. In red letters it burned, "Marcus Reynolds is 62% owned by Wolfe Stone Capital. Former CEO of Stanford Business School. Founder of Reynolds Algorithmic Trading." Brandon Taylor dropped his iPhone. Cynthia Morris involuntarily brought her hand to her mouth. The company's CEO, the old fox Gregory Wolfe, slowly leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of professional calm. "You," Wolfe began, but Marcus raised his hand. "Let's skip the how and why apart." The smile that appeared on his face didn't reach his eyes. "Today we're going to discuss 3 things: restructuring, new personnel appointments and..." He paused theatrically, "the elevator policy for this building." Carlos, still standing at the door, suddenly snorted. The sound burst the tension like a bubble. Marcus turned to him, and for the first time all morning, his eyes softened. "Mendoza's security guard is getting a promotion, by the way. Head of security. He's the only one who's greeted me by name in the last 3 months." The screen changed. It was now a table of names. The top rows glowed green. The bottom ones were red. Very red. Now, Marcus unbuttoned his jacket and sat down at the head of the table. "Let's start with the 2 million you've been losing every month because of a bug in the code. The one I tried to tell you about. When your windows were being cleaned." Cynthia Morris stood with her arms around her elbows, her flawless manicure digging into the expensive fabric of her jacket. Her lips trembled, breaking years of honed image of a cold business shark. "You." Her voice trailed off into a croak. "Why did you?" Marcus sprawled in the leather CEO's chair that still held the warmth of its previous owner. His fingers ran slowly over the armrests, feeling the texture of the elite leather. When he spoke, there was a dangerous sweetness in his voice. Worked as a janitor. The corner of his mouth twitched. To see you. Unmasked. Literally. On the wall behind him, a huge screen broadcast the new owner's first orders. Carlos Mendoza, appointed Director of Corporate Security. Salary tripled. Bonus, a parking space for his old 1987 Ford Mustang. Brandon Taylor, fired for violating corporate ethics. Screenshots from work chat flashed on the screen, racist memes, photo jabs, discussion of that dumb Jackson. Finance Department, system error discovered and corrected. $2 million monthly refund. A slide showed a graphic visualization of what that money could look like as a stack of $100 bills. Tommy the elevator operator, a gray-haired African-American man, the only one who had called Marcus Mr. Reynolds since day one, stood at the door, clutching his old cap. His voice trembled. Mr. Reynolds. Why did you put up with 3 months of this? He made a gesture that included dirty toilets, spilled coffee, and contemptuous glances. Marcus rose slowly. His dark suit caught the light perfectly. He walked over to the panoramic window, beyond which lay the entire city, the same one that had looked down on him for 3 months. You see, Tommy, he turned, and something wild, primal flashed in his eyes. Some things are worth waiting for. For instance. He glanced at Cynthia, who now resembled a caught fish. That look on their faces. The screen behind him showed a live feed from the lobby as Brandon carried his belongings out in a cardboard box under the bewildered stares of his former co-workers. Marcus Reynolds took a deep breath. The air here on the 30th floor smelled different. Power. Truth. And sweet, sweet retribution.